Hi, thank you for joining me. My name is Mindy Mandell. This video is part of a series of videos on Proclus's Elements of Theology. In this video, I'm going to focus on propositions 61 through 65. Throughout this series, I am using the E.R. Dodds translation. For those of you who do not have the book, there is a link in the description box that will lead you to a PDF version of the text. Okay, let's jump back into the text. So what we're looking at today are propositions dealing with grades of causality. And we're going to see that a major theme in the propositions that I'm focusing on in this video deal with power. So 61 and 62 really fit together nicely. And we'll start, of course, with 61, which reads that every power is greater if it be undivided, and less if it be divided. So we're going to see that there is a commensurate relationship between power and unity. For if it be divided, it proceeds to a manifold, and if so, it becomes more remote from the one. And if it becomes more remote, then it will be less powerful, in proportion as it falls away from the one which contains it in unity. And it will also become imperfect, inasmuch as the good of each thing consists in its unity. So in other videos, I've mentioned that there's a certain language he uses when he talks about the first cause as one, and another language he uses when he talks about the first cause as good. We're seeing it here as well. One goes with words like unity and unified and whole. And also now we're seeing power is connected to the idea of unity. Whereas good deals with words like complete and perfect. And we're seeing here that as it falls away from the one, not only does it become less powerful, it also becomes less perfect. So when we talk about the unfolding of reality, we see it unfolding from the first cause of all, which we sometimes call the one, or sometimes call it the good. And as it unfolds, it leads to our physical world, which is differentiated and imperfect in the sense of as relative to the good. Of course, each realm is perfect in its own proper power and unity. So the higher terms we would call unified in the sense of being close to the one. We can also call those higher terms perfect in the sense of being close to the good. So you might recall from the earlier propositions that unity is a condition for all existence. The terms that are closest to the one are more unified, and now we're seeing they're also more powerful, and they have the power to revert on themselves. We call them self-constituted, and we saw that from Proposition 40. And we saw even earlier that terms that are able to maintain their own existence have the cause of their good within them. They are akin to the good. And so in terms of being akin to the good, we call them self-sufficient. So I'd like to keep going back and reviewing past propositions because Proclus is giving us his vision in small little pieces. And it's important to keep trying to put it together to see how these propositions connect, because ultimately what they're pointing to is a vision of reality itself. And we can only see that when we tie them all together. So now we've tied in the idea of being self-sufficient and self-constituted with this relationship of power and unity. Proposition 62, we're going to see, follows very closely from Proposition 61. It reads, every manifold which is near to the one has fewer members than those more remote, but is greater in power. So another way of stating the same basic idea that we saw in Proposition 61, that unity is commensurate with power. For that which is nearer to the one is more like to it, and the idea of likeness in higher terms was Proposition 28. And we saw that the one is constitutive of all things without becoming manifold. The reference to Proposition 5 is that every manifold is posterior to the one. Accordingly, that which is more like to it, being the cause of more existences, just as the one is the cause of all existences, will be more unitary and less divisible, as the first cause is one. The less pluralized is more akin to it qua one, and qua universal cause, the more productive. That is to say, the more powerful. And we have a corollary here that reads, "From this it is apparent that bodily natures are more numerous than souls, and these than intelligences, and the intelligences are more numerous than the divine henads, and the same principle applies universally." In the early years of studying metaphysics, we read this as a way to get a sort of theoretical map, if you will, of the realms of reality. But as we deepen our understanding, we want to be able to apply all of this to our own experiences, to our own state of mind. And I think Propositions 61 and 62 together are really a good example of how we can do this. Because this idea of unity being commensurate with power is really central to our whole philosophical practice. Much of what we do is for the purpose of unifying our energies and our states of mind. We want to bring our fractured thoughts into a unity. Often when we first come to philosophy, we find ourselves having conflicting opinions and beliefs about the nature of reality that we had never questioned before. And so we find ourselves throwing out what doesn't work and unifying our thoughts in that way. We also may find that we have a certain way of being when we're with our friends and another way of being when we're with our family and so on. And as we're starting to question ourselves, we're unifying ourselves in that way as well. Doing this has the effect of bringing us to a healthier state of mind. But also on the philosophical level, it has the effect of increasing our energy, and it allows us to participate in higher states of mind. So this tenet of our metaphysics is key not only to understanding the basic metaphysical map, but also to understanding ourselves. Proposition 63 is a bit tricky. It reads, "Every unparticipated term gives rise to two orders of participated terms, the one in contingent participants and the other in things which participate at all times and in virtue of their nature. For what is enduringly participated is more like to the unparticipated than what is participated for a time only. Prior, therefore, to the constitution of the last named, that which is participated for a time only, there will be constituted something enduringly participated." He again cites Proposition 28. That's the idea that like terms will appear in a series before unlike terms. And these enduringly participated terms, as participated, does not differ from the succeeding term. They're both participated. But as enduring, it's more akin to the unparticipated and more like to it. So it will be that middle term. It's enduring, and in that sense, it is closest to that which is eternal. But as participated, it is similar to what comes after it, because they're both participated, only the latter one is for a time only. Okay, terms participated for a time only are not the sole class of participated terms. For prior to them, there exist terms enduringly participated, through which they too are linked with the unparticipated in an ordered sequence of procession. Nor are terms enduringly participated the sole class, for inasmuch as they exist perpetually, they have an inextinguishable power, whereby they are productive of further terms, namely those which are participated for a time only, and this is the limit of declension. In Proposition 25 that was cited here, stated that whatever is complete proceeds to generate those things which it is capable of producing, imitating in its turn the one originative principle of the universe. And in the explanation of this, he explained that the more complete participates the good more fully. We saw this also in Proposition 61. And it is near to the good. And as more complete, then, it would be the producer of more. And there's a corollary here to 63. From this, it is apparent that the states of unity with which the one irradiates existence are participated some enduringly, others for a time. And in like manner, intellective participations are of two kinds, and the ensoulments produced by souls. And similarly, the participations of the forms also, beauty, likeness, steadfastness, identity, for example, being unparticipated, are yet participated by certain participants enduringly, and derivatively by others for a time in the same class of existence. So he's giving us this basic hierarchy here of terms, where you have the unparticipated, and then that which is participated enduringly, and then that which is participated for a time. So why does Proclus need to give us this? Well, it might help to think of unparticipated as meaning that which is transcendent, whereas participated is that which is immanent and that which participates it. Proclus needed a way to explain why some souls, for example, such as the soul of the universe, can participate intellect enduringly, whereas our rational soul participates sporadically. In fact, much of our spiritual practice, as I was talking about with Proposition 62, is that we want to increase our energy, our power, so that we can participate in news more enduringly. And so he needed a way to explain this, and this is the way he does it. Okay, let's see what's going on in Proposition 64. This one reads, every original monad gives rise to two series, one consisting of substances complete in themselves, and one of irradiations which have their substantiality in something other than themselves. So don't worry at this point if you're not sure what he means by irradiations. We'll just pull out the terminology that he uses for both of these categories, and we'll make two different lists and see if maybe we can't figure out what he's talking about. So he's given us two categories. One he's calling substances complete in themselves. The other he's calling irradiations. So let's see how he explains this. He says, for if the outgoing proceeds by a declension through terms akin to the constitutive causes, and again, that's Proposition 28, from the wholly perfect must arise things complete in their kind. And by these latter, the origin of things incomplete must be mediated in due sequence. So there must be an unfolding from the more complete to the less complete, so that there will be one order of substances complete in themselves and another of incomplete substances. So coming back to our chart here, we can say that in this first category, he called these complete in themselves. And in the other category, he called these incomplete substances. So going on with our reading here, he tells us that the incomplete substances are upon such a level that they belong to their participants. For being incomplete, they require a substrate for their existence. So they belong to their participants. They require a substrate. And another way of saying that is that they are in another. So belonging to the participant, you might think, for example, of those aspects of soul which are most closely tied to the body. They require a substrate. They belong to their participant. They are in another. Okay, so that was how he described the incomplete substances. But now let's take a look at the order of substances complete in themselves. The former in that sentence that's in yellow. The former make the participants belong to them. For being complete, they fill the participants with themselves and establish them in themselves. And for their substantial existence, they have no need of inferior beings. And so saying that they do not require a substrate is another way of saying that they are self-constituted. And as such, they are in themselves. Accordingly, those substances which are complete in themselves, while by their discrimination into a manifold they fall short of their original monad, the unparticipated monad, they are yet in some wise assimilated to it by their self-complete existence, whereas the incomplete, not only as existing in another, fall away from the monad which exists in itself, the self-constituted, but also as incomplete from the all-completing monad, the unparticipated. But all procession advances through similars until it reaches the wholly dissimilar, and again that's proposition 28. Thus each of the original monads give rise to two series. And then there's a corollary here for your reflection. From this it is apparent that of the henads some proceed self-complete from the one, while others are irradiated states of unity. And of the intelligences, some are self-complete substances, while others are intellectual perfections. And of souls, some belong to themselves, while others belong to ensouled bodies, as being but phantasms of souls. And so not every unity is a god, but only the self-complete henad. Not every intellectual property is an intelligence, but only the existential. Not every irradiation of soul is a soul, but there are also reflections of souls. In thinking about this corollary, it might be helpful to remember, as we saw back in Propositions 58, 59, where I used this diagram, that the higher terms extend farther. And so that's why they extend into this realm of what he's calling irradiations. All we have left for us now is Proposition 65. All that subsists in any fashion has its being either in its cause as an originative potency, or as a substantial predicate, or by participation after the manner of an image. So what he's showing us here are three aspects of anything that exists. And so let's take a look at it in terms of a triad to help visualize it. So all that subsists in any fashion has its being either in its cause as an originative potency, or as what he's calling a substantial predicate, or it's by participation after the manner of an image. For either we see the product as pre-existent in the producer, which is its cause, for every cause comprehends its effect before its emergence, having primitively that character which the latter has by derivation. And that was Proposition 18. Or we see the producer in the product, for the latter participates its producer, and it reveals in itself by derivation what the producer already is primitively. Or else we contemplate each thing in its own station, neither in its cause nor in its resultant, for its cause has a higher, its resultant a lower mode of being than itself. And besides these, there must surely be some being which is its own, and it is as a substantial predicate that each has its being in its own station. So he described again the three aspects of the same term. It's either pre-existent in its cause, or it's in the product, or it's in its own station. Notice that this language of describing the unfolding of reality allows Proclus to avoid the language of potentiality. That is a difference between the Platonists and Aristotle. What we see here is we're getting the building block that is going to be used later in describing the triad of being, life, and intellect. That's going to come much later, Proposition 103, but here we're getting the language for it. So I do hope you found that helpful. And if you do have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave those below. Also, hit the like button if you found this helpful. And if you don't already subscribe, please think about doing so. I put out videos about every week or so, and you'll get notifications when there's a new video out. Thank you very much.